Hello everyone and welcome to this video. You can see here we are in Stormworks, but we're going to talk about the game the developers are referring to as Not Stormworks 2. Now of course that is not the actual name. In the latest Q&A session with the developers we found out it does have a name, but we don't know it yet. So pretty much what this video is a collection of ideas, bullet points, things that we've gathered throughout the last year, I'd say, of receiving information and sort of my hopes of what this game can be. Now we're going to stick in Stormworks for the explanation because I'm hoping and assuming there will be a lot of parallels with Not Stormworks 2 and Stormworks itself. But first I'm going to show you something that recaps the so far the information we have quite nicely. I am referring to Alistair's video. You can see Alistair here put together a video, it's 6 minutes long, of everything we know about Not Stormworks 2. Now this is a great summary and I highly recommend you take a look, check it out. He's been gathering information and notes and presenting it in a very meaningful way. So I do recommend you take a look at that if you are interested in the actual information, but here I'm going to go through my own assessment as well as things that I've kind of concluded or hope that we see. So like I said, we know there is a name and we know that in the next 6 months we're going to receive some information. Now what that information actually consists of, we're hoping that it is at least something like a possibly a demo, but maybe it'll be a closed testing, something like that. So if it's closed testing, hopefully I'll be a part of that testing. I really hope so. So that is quite interesting. So in the next 6 months, Not Stormworks 2 will gain a lot of traction, we're hoping. So that is one of the things. Now the biggest thing that was revealed in the Q&A session was the fact that Not Stormworks 2 is different, better in some instances, and not as good as Stormworks in some instances. So that was kind of the big hint, the big tidbit of information that we received. So it's not Stormworks 2. That's kind of clear. Stormworks will remain, and this other game will have other perks, other benefits, and the other big thing that we received of note was that smaller creations would be better in this new game. So what that means I don't quite know yet, but in essence it was said that larger vehicles are still going to be kind of the bread and butter of Stormworks. As you could see, we got a massive plane, we got a massive ship. Things like this, or so the developers claim, is not possible in this, or not possible, I'm not going to say that, but not as good. That was kind of the wording. They said that it will be better for smaller vehicles and Stormworks better for large. What does that mean? What could that mean? Could it mean an optimization for smaller vehicles to kind of function in a better way? Of course, we all know that currently Stormworks is not, well, it's possible to figure out the system, but it's definitely not as adapted for smaller vehicles. The ocean is kind of soupy in theory, I think, and so it just like it doesn't quite work as well. But honestly, I've made it work in my own creations and a lot of others have too, so it's not to say that Stormworks is no good for small creations. I would definitely never say that, but I definitely think that there could be some improvement. And a lot of times in this Q&A session, when people asked specifically about things regarding to the other game, or regarding to Stormworks in general, the kind of general, I would say, response from the developers were saying something along the lines of, oh, well, if we were building Stormworks from the ground up, we would implement that. Now, it may not be the case, but I'm certainly hoping and thinking that when the developers said things like, if we built Stormworks from the ground up, we would include that, that could be a little bit of a hint towards what this other game will have. Now, not in every case, I'm sure, but in a lot of the cases, I think that may be, or hope to be, the case. Now, things like that people referred to as the details in the world itself, like we do have kind of the trees and the geography, but someone asked in the latest video if they would add more detailed rocks, grass, things like that, and the response was that they're going to keep Stormworks visually as it is and only focus on adding mechanical elements. So that response warranted or opened up kind of the possibility, the idea that potentially the other game will have a more detailed geography. Now, coming back to the small vehicles versus large vehicles is of course a question of the map. Will the map be as large as we are used to? Probably not. I will kind of guess, if not to mention we have the moon, but probably not. If this is kind of catered to smaller vehicles, I would think that you can get a lot more done and efficient plus detailed geography with a smaller map. Imagine the whole game was this island or these series of islands, but with like a super detailed type of world. Now, it may not even be this large, but I think it probably would, just based off kind of my thoughts, especially to have kind of a good amount of places to explore. One other question that was asked, that someone did ask, was regarding the animations in the game. So of course we have the helm, we kind of just glitch to the chair or jump to the chair, jump off the chair. There's not really any type of animation, and of course with the stick I'm pressing AD right now, nothing's happening. But in this new game there was reference to saying there will be more animations, moving handles, steering wheels, etc., things like that, quality of life things. Yeah, we do have buttons, obviously, we do have keys, it's quite nice to see them move, and we have the famed throttle lever, so that's quite nice. But it would be very, very interesting to actually have to get in and out of the seats, to actually have to pick things up, and with that you don't like jump across the room, but possibly there will be more of a push to get closer to that specific chair, maybe even, I would say probably, but maybe even have proper access, like you have to be within a 1 block vicinity before you can get into it, versus the kind of the glitch jump entering seats that we are familiar and that we exploit. I mean, I do it in a lot of my creations, my mini subs as well have that, rely on that, otherwise you physically cannot get in or out. So it would be kind of interesting if in this game that becomes a possibility. One other thing was mentioned or kind of hinted at in the Q&A session, and that was that the game Not Stormworks 2 will be more realistic. Someone asked if it'll be more or less realistic than Stormworks. The answer was more realistic, and that actually is quite interesting, because what that possibly means, or what that could mean, is a more defined interaction of the vehicle with the actual land itself. So that could be coming in terms of steering. You know, we do have our bug or kind of XML editing to make vehicles have proper steering, proper mass, and I kind of wave my fingers with make quotation marks proper. I mean, the game has its own predefined set of parameters that the game defines as the steering that you have, and we of course then kind of exploit it, change it, move it around to better suit our own specific needs. But like, for example, you just saw how I turned the wheel there and the vehicle doesn't react right away. I mean, it kind of like, I'd say the grip is a little, it depends on your vehicle and depends on your application and weight and a lot of other factors. That's where people kind of say the wheels aren't as realistic. Yeah, you can increase the mod, you can mod them, you can change the XML, but maybe the new game will have kind of an interaction set with wheels or with the water, like I said, for smaller boats and things. So how vehicles will interact. Now, as of now, it's not quite clear what form of transportation this new game will have, whether it'll be purely sea-based, kind of like how we have Stormworks originally was pretty much the water aspect, whether it's going to be land-based, or whether it's going to be air-based. So that right now is kind of unknown. Hopefully when the demo or closed session comes up, that will be a little bit more clearly defined. But for now, what do they mean by realistic? That's not quite clear. Another thing I just thought about for smaller builds, will that mean we have a smaller workbench to physically build them in, or will they go through with that altogether? I remember in one of the other Q&A sessions, the developers mentioned something along the lines of, if they could go back, would they almost questioned, would they have sort of a non-workbench style building approach? Of course, the workbench I'm talking about is this, and we kind of have this CAD interface. Now, one thing that was mentioned by Deltars in another video or another Q&A session was whether this system would be live block based. I'm guessing that's something like Minecraft. I actually don't play Minecraft myself, but would it be in the game itself, like I build something right here with my character, or could it mean that within this workbench type of interface itself, I have the ability to live test the creation? So for example, we have something along the lines of this. Could I go and then press maybe another type of button here that I could then turn this on, and I'd interact with the key, boom, vehicles on, boom, I press this button. That would actually be very cool, I think. I think that's something that probably in Stormworks, that's something people actually constantly ask for, to like live diagnose things. Because imagine just how cool would it be, I go and turn on that switch, see that the electricity is working while I'm still in kind of this CAD mode, and I could go and interact, potentially even sit at the wheel, move the wheel, see that my rudders are spinning, the propellers are going. So almost like a hybrid of in-game and workbench. Or would it be fully workbench based, or fully kind of in the world based? So that's one thing we don't know. Another thing that is, of course, always a possibility is the blocks are a different size. The basic fundamental building block of Stormworks is 0.25 meters, or a quarter of a meter. So 4 of them gets you a full meter. You could see in the bottom right corner I have in blue, it says 4 blocks 1 meter. If this block size is reduced, then of course building smaller vehicles will be easier and more detailed. You'll get more space and capacity out of your blocks than what we currently have, and that would also imply that making a bigger creation would be harder, because for a bigger creation you'd obviously need a lot more of the blocks. You see the block grid I have here, imagine having 4 times that, just if it was dropped to a lower resolution, or I guess a higher resolution. One thing that was asked in a question that Deltar has actually responded, and the answer was quite interesting. The question was whether or not Stormworks can get kind of waves that are interactive, and what I'm assuming was meant by that was like wake, and not just wake, but like that your boat actually affects the waves. And if you know the game, if we kind of go into the wall here, you'll see that even though we're inside the sand, the water just continues. The water is pretty much equivalent everywhere, no matter if it's land or not land. But what Deltars responded was quite interesting, was that in their other game, and I don't quite know the name of it, that the water will actually interact with the shore, like move up on rocks, move up on shore, and presumably interact with the boats as well. So if a boat is cutting very quickly through the waves, that the waves will actually kind of be parted by it, and it'll actually create a physical 3D wake. So that is quite interesting, quite an interesting prospect for this new game to have a very interactive type of water versus one that we just sort of glide over and get to use. Well, what if we actually get to change it, make a dam, make a building that interacts with that water versus just kind of riding over it? So that was something that I found quite interesting. It did open the possibility that we might get something that is differently interactive with the interface of our creation of other things too. Now, one thing I didn't cover is space. Would this be a space or sci-fi game? That's also a possibility too. I do know there's another game that's currently out. I'm not quite sure what it is. I forgot the name, but it's kind of like based on a sci-fi type world, like, and you're live building vehicles and things. I remember watching some videos. I'm sure you can comment in the comments what it is. It's probably quite cringy when I kind of say my explanation, especially if I'm not that familiar with these things, but I'm kind of running off memory as well as what I sort of saw. So that's quite neat. The possibility if it's sort of a different world or a sci-fi world. Of course, that would also help the developers when people say, oh, the water doesn't act the way it should, or gas doesn't act as it should, or whatever. Well, if it's not even on this planet, then it's clearly up to the imagination on what the parameters of this other world would be. That is sort of my quick rundown, first thoughts of what Not Stormworks 2 could consist of. I absolutely plan on making videos of it, being sort of a content creator for this new game, tutorials, whatever the case may be, gameplay, whatever. So I'm quite intrigued, quite curious. It's a nice, interesting, and new aspect for me to be able to participate in a game from the release. Of course, Stormworks, there was Mr. NJ, and I came quite late, whereas this we'd get to experience in the beginning. So thank you all for watching. Huge shout out to all of my supporters. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope that you enjoy the perks of your supportership. Thank you to the game developers. Thank you to my moderators and admin staff, and thank you to each and every one of you for watching, participating, commenting, joining the community, and making this game so awesome and so fun. Until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.